Envoie ta lumière et ta vérité, qu'elle guide mes pas et me conduise à ta montagne sainte, jusqu'en ta demeure. Prenons ensemble notre premier cantique. Béni soit le Seigneur, nun danket alle Gott. Bienvenue ce matin à la petite église française du Saint-Esprit. Willkommen this morning to the little French church du Saint-Esprit for our Holy Communion and Oktoberfest. So we're gathering together today in remembrance of all the saints of God who have traveled through Germany, lived in Germany, in Alsace, and all these different parts of France and Germany that are very dear to all of us and some of us especially. You can find the bulletins on the first page of our website. Vous pouvez trouver le bulletin sur la première page de notre site internet ou juste en dessous de la vidéo que vous regardez sur YouTube or just under the video you're watching. We're also going to use the Book of Common Prayer in French, not in German, in French today. That you can also find a link to it on our website. Tournons-nous vers le Seigneur. Béni soit Dieu, le Père, le Fils et le Saint-Esprit.
Béni
Soit son règne, maintenant et à jamais. Amen. Dieu Tout-Puissant, tu pénètres le cœur de tout homme, tu connais les désirs de chacun, et rien ne te reste caché. Envoie ton Esprit Saint pour qu'il purifie nos pensées. Nous pourrons ainsi t'aimer jusqu'à la perfection et célébrer dignement ton saint nom. Par Jésus le Christ, notre Seigneur. Amen. Prenons la gloire, page 258, page 258. Ensemble. Gloire à Dieu au plus haut des cieux, et paix sur la terre aux hommes qu'il aime. Nous te louons, nous te bénissons, nous t'adorons, nous te glorifions. Nous te rendons grâce pour ton immense gloire. Seigneur Dieu, Roi du ciel, Dieu le Père Tout-Puissant, Seigneur, Fils unique, Jésus-Christ, Seigneur Dieu, Agneau de Dieu, le Fils du Père, toi qui enlèves le péché du monde, prends pitié de nous. Toi qui enlèves le péché du monde, reçois notre prière. Toi qui es assise à la droite du Père, prends pitié de nous. Car toi seul es saint, toi seul es Seigneur, toi seul es le Très-Haut, Jésus-Christ, avec le Saint-Esprit, dans la gloire de Dieu le Père. Amen. Le Seigneur soit avec vous.
Et avec ton esprit.
Prions le Seigneur. Dieu Tout-Puissant, plus fidèle à écouter nos prières que nous ne le sommes à les adresser. Tu combles ceux qui t'implorent bien au-delà de leurs mérites et de leurs désirs. Répands sur nous ta miséricorde, en délivrant notre conscience de ce qui l'inquiète, et en nous accordant ce que nous ne sommes dignes de demander que par les mérites de Jésus-Christ, notre médiateur et sauveur. Lui qui vit et règne avec toi et le Saint-Esprit, un seul Dieu, dans les siècles des siècles. Amen. Amen. Asseyez-vous s'il vous plaît pour notre première lecture. Please be seated for our first reading.
Notre première lecture est tirée de l'Exode chapitre 20, versets 1 à 4, puis versets 7 à 9 et versets 12 à 20. Our first reading is from the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 1 to 4, then 7 to 9, then 12 to 20. Alors Dieu prononça toutes ces paroles. « Je suis l'Éternel, ton Dieu, qui t'ai fait sortir d'Égypte, de la maison d'esclavage. Tu n'auras pas d'autre Dieu devant moi. Tu ne te feras pas de sculpture sacrée, ni de représentation de ce qui est en haut dans le ciel, en bas sur la terre et dans l'eau plus bas que la terre. Tu n'utiliseras pas le nom de l'Éternel, ton Dieu, à la légère, car l'Éternel ne laissera pas impuni celui qui utilisera son nom à la légère. Souviens-toi de faire un jour du repos, un jour saint. Pendant 6 jours, tu travailleras et tu feras tout ce que tu dois faire. Honore ton père et ta mère afin de vivre longtemps dans le pays que l'Éternel, ton Dieu, te donne. Tu ne commettras pas de meurtre. Tu ne commettras pas d'adultère. Tu ne commettras pas de vol. Tu ne porteras pas de faux témoignages contre ton prochain. Tu ne convoiteras pas la maison de ton prochain. Tu ne convoiteras pas la femme de ton prochain, ni son esclave, ni sa servante, ni son bœuf, ni son âne, ni quoi que ce soit qui lui appartienne. » Tout le peuple entendait les coups de tonnerre et le son de la trompette et voyait les flammes de la montagne fumante. À ce spectacle, le peuple tremblait et se tenait à bonne distance. Ils dirent à Moïse : « Parle-nous, toi, et nous t'écouterons, et nous écouterons. Mais que Dieu ne nous parle pas, sinon nous mourrions. » Moïse dit au peuple : « N'ayez pas peur, car c'est pour vous mettre à l'épreuve que Dieu est venu, et c'est pour que vous ayez sa crainte devant les yeux, afin de ne pas pécher. Parole du Seigneur. Nous rendons grâce à Dieu.
Prenons ensemble le psaume 19. Let's pray together Psalm 19. Ensemble. Le ciel raconte la gloire de Dieu et l'étendue révèle l'œuvre de ses mains. Le jour en instruit un autre jour, la nuit en donne connaissance à une autre nuit. Ce n'est pas un langage, ce ne sont pas des paroles, on n'entend pas leur son. Cependant, leur voix parcourt toute la terre, leurs discours vont jusqu'aux extrémités du monde, où il a dressé une tente pour le soleil. Et le soleil, pareil à un époux qui sort de sa chambre, s'élance dans la course avec la joie d'un héros. Il se lève à une extrémité du ciel et termine sa course à l'autre extrémité. Rien n'échappe à sa chaleur. La loi de l'Éternel est parfaite, elle donne du réconfort. Le témoignage de l'Éternel est vrai, il rend sage celui qui manque d'expérience. Les décrets de l'Éternel sont droits, ils réjouissent le cœur. Les commandements de l'Éternel sont clairs, ils éclairent la vue. La crainte de l'Éternel est pure, elle subsiste pour toujours. Les jugements de l'Éternel sont vrais, ils sont tous justes. Ils sont plus précieux que l'or, que beaucoup d'or fin. Ils sont plus doux que le miel, même le miel qui coule des rayons. Ton serviteur aussi est éclairé par eux. Pour celui qui les respecte, la récompense est grande. Qui discerne ses erreurs? Pardonne-moi celles que j'ignore. Préserve aussi ton serviteur du sentiment d'orgueil, qu'il ne domine pas sur moi. Alors je serai intègre, je ne commettrai pas de grands péchés. Fais bon accueil aux paroles de ma bouche et aux sentiments de mon cœur. Éternel, mon rocher, toi qui me rachètes, gloire au Père et au Fils et au Saint-Esprit, au Dieu qui est, qui était et qui vient, pour les siècles des siècles. Amen. Notre deuxième lecture est tirée de l'épître aux Philippiens, chapitre 3, versets 4 à 14. Our second reading is taken from the Epistle to Philippians, chapter 3, verse 4 to 14. Si quelqu'un croit pouvoir se confier dans sa condition, je le peux plus encore. J'ai été circoncis le 8e jour. Je suis issu du peuple d'Israël, de la tribu de Benjamin, hébreu, né d'hébreu. En ce qui concerne la loi, j'étais pharisien. Du point de vue du zèle, j'étais persécuteur de l'Église. Par rapport à la justice de la loi, j'étais irréprochable. Mais ces qualités, qui étaient pour moi des gains, je les ai regardées comme une perte à cause de Christ. Et je considère même tout comme une perte à cause du bien suprême qu'est la connaissance de Jésus-Christ, mon Seigneur. À cause de lui, je me suis laissé dépouiller de tout et je considère tout cela comme des ordures afin de gagner Christ et d'être trouvé en lui, non avec ma justice, celle qui vient de la loi, mais avec celle qui s'obtient par la foi en Christ, la justice qui vient de Dieu et qui est fondée sur la foi. Ainsi, je reconnaîtrai Christ, la puissance de sa résurrection et la communion à ses souffrances, en devenant conforme à celui dans sa mort pour parvenir, d'une manière ou d'une autre, à la résurrection des morts. Ce n'est pas que j'ai déjà remporté le prix ou que j'ai déjà atteint la perfection, mais je cours pour tâcher de m'en emparer, puisque de moi aussi Jésus-Christ s'est emparé. Frères et sœurs, je n'estime pas m'en être moi-même déjà emparé, mais je fais une chose. Oubliant ce qui est derrière et me portant vers ce qui est devant, je cours vers le but pour remporter le prix de l'appel céleste de Dieu en Jésus-Christ. Parole du Seigneur. Nous rendons grâce à Dieu. Chantons ensemble notre prochain cantique, nous labourons la terre. Das heilige Evangelium nach Matthäus, Kapitel 21, Vers 33 zu 46.
Gloire à toi, Seigneur.
Höret ein anderes Gleichnis. Es war ein Auswatter, der pflanzte einen Weinberg und führte einen Zaun darum und grub eine Kelter darin und baute einen Turm und tat ihn den Weingärten aus und zog über Land. Da nun Herbeikam die Zeit der Früchte. Sandte er seine Knechte zu den Weingärten, dass sie eine Früchte empfingen. Da nahmen die Weingärtner seine Knechte, eine stäubten sie, den anderen töteten sie, den dritten steinigten sie. Abermals sandte er andere Knechte, mehr denn der ersten waren, und sie taten ihnen gleich so. Danach sandte er seinen Sohn zu ihnen und sprach: Sie werden sich vor meinem Sohn scheuen. Da aber die Weingärten den Sohn sahen, sprachen sie untereinander: Das ist der Erb. Kommt, lass uns ihn töten und sein Erbgut an uns bringen. Und sie nahmen ihn und stießen ihn zum Weinberg hinaus und töteten ihn. Wenn nun der Herr der Weinbergs kommen wird, was wird er dieses Weingarten tun? Sie sprachen zu ihm: Er wird die Bösewichte überall umbringen und seinen Weinberg andere Weingärten austun, die ihm die Früchte zur rechten Zeit geben. Jesus sprach zu ihnen: Habt ihr nie gelesen in der Schrift: Der Stein, den die Bauleute verworfen haben, der ist zum Eckstein geworden. Von dem Herrn ist das geschehen, und es ist wunderbar vor unseren Augen. Darum sage ich euch, das Reich Gottes wird von euch genommen und einem Volke gegeben werden, das seine Früchte bringt. Und wer auf diesem Stein fällt, der wird zerschellen. Auf wen aber er fällt, den wird er zermalmen. Und da die Hohenpriester und Pharisäer seine Gleichnisse hörten, verstanden sie, dass er von ihnen redete. Und sie trachteten danach, wie sie ihn griffen. Aber sie fürchtete sich vor dem Volk, denn es hielt ihn für einen Propheten.
Écoutez une autre parabole. Il y avait un propriétaire qui planta une vigne. Il l'entoura d'une haie, y creusa un pressoir et construisit un tour. Puis il la loua à des vignerons et partit en voyage. Lorsque le temps de la récolte fut arrivé, il envoya ses serviteurs vers les vignerons pour recevoir sa part de récolte. Mais les vignerons s'emparèrent de ses serviteurs. Ils battirent l'un, tuèrent l'autre et lapidèrent le troisième. Il envoya encore d'autres serviteurs, en plus grand nombre que les premiers, et les vignerons les traitèrent de la même manière. Enfin, il envoya vers eux son fils, en se disant « Ils auront du respect pour mon fils. » Mais quand les vignerons virent le fils, ils se dirent entre eux « Voilà l'héritier, venez, tuons-le et emparons-nous de son héritage. » Et s'emparèrent de lui, le jetèrent hors de la vigne et le tuèrent. Maintenant, lorsque le maître de la vigne viendra, que fera-t-il de ces vignerons? Ils lui répondirent, il fera mourir misérablement ces misérables, et il louera la vigne à d'autres vignerons qui lui donneront sa part de récolte au moment voulu. Jésus leur dit, n'avez-vous jamais lu dans les Écritures? La pierre qu'ont rejetée ceux qui construisaient est devenue la pierre angulaire. C'est l'œuvre du Seigneur et c'est un prodige à nos yeux. C'est pourquoi je vous le dis, le royaume de Dieu vous sera enlevé et sera donné à un peuple qui en produira les fruits. Celui qui tombera sur cette pierre s'y brisera et celui sur qui elle tombera sera écrasé. Après avoir entendu ces paraboles, les chefs des prêtres et les pharisiens comprirent que c'était d'eux que Jésus parlait. Ils cherchaient à l'arrêter, mais ils redoutaient les réactions de la foule parce qu'elle considérait Jésus comme un prophète. Évangile du Seigneur.
Louange à toi, Seigneur Jésus.
Asseyez-vous, s'il vous plaît. Le sermon en français se trouve sur notre site web et en bas de notre chaîne YouTube. You can follow the sermon in English on the first page of our website. There's a little link there, and it also links you to the French text. You will find it nowhere auf Deutsch. La première fois que j'ai célébré la communion, ce même dimanche, en 1994, j'étais loin de savoir que tant d'années plus tard, je me tiendrais ici, à ce même autel, et encore moins en train de célébrer Oktoberfest. Au cours de ces années, le monde, la ville de New York, notre petite paroisse, ont connu des événements dramatiques, ainsi que des transformations profondes. Nous vivons en ce moment dans l'une de ces périodes de transformation. Je suis heureux de pouvoir vous accompagner pendant cette période et j'espère passer de nombreuses années encore avec vous. Certains Alsaciens et Lorrains, nés dans les années 1860, et ayant vécu la Seconde Guerre mondiale, ont changé de nationalité 5 fois. Français, puis allemand, et vice-versa, sans jamais ne déménager. Ils ont dû s'adapter à ces nouvelles conditions, tout en conservant leur intégrité. Tout comme Saint Esprit a changé dans les 2 dernières décennies, et nous avons toujours été obligés de nous réexaminer et de trouver de nouvelles façons de servir Dieu dans notre communauté, tout en restant fidèles aux évangiles. Nous avons sûrement changé tout autant que nous avons grandi, mais notre message général reste le même. Accueillir l'exilé et l'étranger, trouver le Christ en chacun et prier Dieu ensemble. Nos défis actuels ne rendent pas les choses plus faciles, mais ils apportent avec eux de nouvelles possibilités que nous venons à peine de commencer à explorer. Lorsque nous avons célébré Oktoberfest pour la première fois il y a 19 ans, je ne connaissais presque rien de cette fête. J'avais une idée générale, une image qui consistait en chopes de bière mousseuse avec des montagnes de saucisses ingurgitées au rythme de la polka et des groupes flonflons. Mais après quelques recherches sur le festival, j'ai découvert qu'il prenait sa source dans le mariage du prince Louis de Bavière et de la princesse Thérèse de Saxe-Hildburghausen. Leurs noces, en octobre 1810, ont connu un tel succès qu'elles sont devenues un événement annuel sur la Theresienwiese, une vaste place juste en dehors de Munich. C'est aussi le moment de l'année où la grande fête de vendange se tient dans l'Alsace-Lorraine. Parce que Oktoberfest coïncide avec la fête de la vendange, ces célébrations sont liées et nous permettent de nous rassembler afin d'exprimer notre gratitude envers les grâces de la nature. Le thème du mariage est particulièrement approprié dans ce contexte. La Bible nous dit que nous devons vivre en symbiose avec la nature, une relation apparentée au mariage. Dieu serait la personne qui accompagne la mariée jusqu'à l'autel le jour de son mariage. Il confie la nature aux êtres humains dans une confiance sacrée et non comme un article qui peut être exploité ou vendu. Nous faisons des promesses de fidélité et de soutien dans cette relation. Nous commençons à réaliser que si le mariage entre l'homme et la nature se brisait lors de sa veillée, nous nous attendrions à ce que des choses terribles arrivent. L'une des raisons pour lesquelles nous célébrons l'Oktoberfest dans une église francophone est de nous rappeler de l'esprit de tolérance de l'Allemagne d'il y a 500 ans. Si l'État indépendant de la Rhénanie n'avait pas existé, il serait peu probable que la plupart des gens qui ont fondé cette petite église aient vécu et vu les États-Unis. Les événements tragiques du XXe siècle ont obscurci le fait que pour la plus grande partie de l'histoire de l'Europe, l'Allemagne était réputée comme l'une de ses plus tolérantes nations. Lors de cette année d'élection aux États-Unis, les leçons de l'histoire européenne ne pourraient pas être plus à propos. La Première Guerre mondiale nous apprend que les désirs empiristes et d'être une suprématie mondiale sont incompatibles avec un esprit de tolérance. L'exercice de notre démocratie aujourd'hui n'a jamais été aussi important. Ce que nous considérons souvent comme acquis peut si facilement nous être retiré. Ceux qui ne connaissent rien de l'histoire du milieu du XXe siècle sont surpris d'apprendre que la France, l'Allemagne, l'Angleterre étaient, de mémoire d'hommes, engagés dans une guerre amèrement destructive qui a laissé les villes de Coventry et de Dresde en ruine. Une occasion comme celle-ci nous donne une bonne opportunité d'examiner notre complaisance, non seulement dans notre engagement politique, mais aussi dans nos vies spirituelles. Si notre planète devait ressembler encore un jour au vignoble de Dieu, il est temps pour nous de cesser d'exploiter la nature et d'apprendre à vivre en paix avec ceux qui nous partageons le monde. Cette petite église est une partie du vignoble de Dieu. Alors que nous la labourons ensemble lors d'une saison si difficile, souvenons-nous à qui elle appartient. Souvenons-nous aussi de son prix. Nous sommes rassemblés pour rappeler l'amour du Christ pour nous sur la croix. Enfin, prions pour que la paix que nous trouvons en chacun de nous, différente comme nous sommes, soit un exemple de l'aspect que la paix pourrait avoir dans le monde.
Prions ensemble avec la prière, la forme numéro 6, page 292. Page 292, form number 6. En paix, nous te prions, Seigneur notre Dieu, pour tous les humains dans leur vie quotidienne et dans leur travail, pour nos familles, nos amis, nos voisins et pour ceux qui sont seuls, pour cette communauté, cette nation et pour le monde, pour ceux qui œuvrent pour la justice, la liberté et la paix, pour que l'on fasse un usage juste et responsable de ta création, victimes de la faim, de la peur, de l'injustice et de l'oppression. Pour ceux qui vivent dans le danger, la peine et toutes sortes de difficultés.
Pour tous ceux qui se dévouent auprès des malades, des isolés et des pauvres.
Pour la paix et l'unité de l'Église de Dieu. Pour tous ceux qui proclament l'Évangile et tous ceux qui cherchent la vérité. Pour Michael, notre primat, pour nos évêques, pour tous les évêques et les autres ministres, pour tous ceux qui servent Dieu dans son Église. Pour les besoins particuliers et les préoccupations de cette communauté. Seigneur, écoute-nous, car ta miséricorde est infinie. Nous te rendons grâce, Seigneur, pour tous les bienfaits de cette vie. Nous t'exaltons, ô Dieu notre Roi.
Et nous bénirons ton nom, toujours et à jamais.
Que ton amour, Seigneur, soit sur nous.
Car notre espoir est en toi.
Prions ce matin pour l'Église, partout à travers le monde, et particulièrement pour les églises d'Alsace et de Lorraine, l'Union des églises luthériennes, pour les églises en Allemagne. Nous te prions, Seigneur, que ton Église à travers le monde pratique la même attention et le même soin pour la création que celui qui a inspiré Saint François d'Assise. Nous te prions qu'elle travaille toujours plus à l'union entre les peuples. Nous te prions aussi, Seigneur, pour que ton Église ne se confonde pas avec les nations. Nous te prions, Seigneur, pour le monde, pour tous les peuples de la terre et pour notre planète, surtout aujourd'hui, pour l'Alsace, la Lorraine, pour l'Allemagne. Nous te prions particulièrement pour l'Allemagne ce week-end, alors qu'elle célèbre les 30 ans de sa réunification. Nous te prions, Seigneur, pour l'Union européenne, qui préserve et travaille toujours plus à la concorde des peuples, qu'elle le fasse avec justice, égalité. Nous te prions, Seigneur, pour l'amitié franco-allemande. Nous te rendons grâce pour ce que tu as permis de faire après tant de guerres et tant de conflits. Là où la mort est passée, Seigneur, tu as fait passer la vie. Nous te rendons grâce, Seigneur, pour tes bontés et ton soutien. Nous prions aussi pour les États-Unis, pour les divisions dans ce pays. Et nous prions pour tous les animaux, toutes les créatures de cette terre, dont nous nous sommes nous-mêmes divisés et contre lesquels nous menons notre propre guerre. Nous nous lamentons, Seigneur, pour nos actions qui provoquent la disparition d'un nombre incalculable d'espèces, si rapide. Nous te prions, Seigneur, de nous guider pour cette réconciliation, pour que nous reconnaissions nos fautes et que nous devenions les gardiens fidèles de ton jardin. Nous prions pour les malades, pour toutes les personnes qui ont besoin de nos prières, pour Rosemary, Erta, Richard et Aurora, pour Vanessa, Peggy, Carole, Melissa, le mari de Reese, Bob et sa famille, Gloire et sa famille, Hélène, Kevin et Linda. Nous te prions, Seigneur, pour tous ceux qui sont touchés ou malades du Covid-19. Nous te supplions de nous libérer, de nous délivrer de cette pandémie. Garde-nous en bonne santé en cette période de réouverture. Et donne-nous aussi la sagesse pour écouter les chercheurs et les médecins. Nous rendons grâce, Seigneur, pour ta providence, ton amour et tes soins, pour tous ceux qui ont besoin de nourriture, d'argent, de logement, d'un accès aux services médicaux et sociaux. Nous te prions, Seigneur, pour ceux qui restent chez eux et qui trouvent cet isolement long, difficile. Que personne ne se sente isolé et séparé, oublié de toi ou de ses voisins. Nous te rendons grâce, Seigneur, pour ce beau temps d'automne, pour les progrès faits contre le virus, pour le don que tu nous fais de notre vie et de notre souffle. Nous rendons grâce particulièrement aujourd'hui pour notre recteur Nigel, le bon serviteur de ta vigne, qui célèbre en ce moment l'anniversaire de son arrivée à Saint Esprit, il y a 26 ans. Nous te remercions, Seigneur, de son service fidèle à cette communauté. Nous te confions par la prière tous ceux que nous ne voyons plus, mais qui nous restent chers. Odile, Cathy, Othello, Fujio, Ernestine, Marjorie, Rush, Hugo, Herndon, Monseigneur Désiré du diocèse de Goma. Et nous prions pour toutes celles et ceux qui sont en deuil en ce moment. Pour Sam, Yves et Martha, Makiko, Lorraine, Tasha, Jacques, Julien, Rita, Claudaline et le diocèse de Goma. Nous te prions pour nous-mêmes, Seigneur, aujourd'hui, pour notre Église du Saint-Esprit, surtout pour tous ceux et celles, tous les membres actuels et passés, dont l'histoire, la vie, est liée au peuple, aux terres d'Allemagne et d'Alsace. Te prions ce matin pour Fred, pour sa famille en Alsace. Nous te prions pour notre consistoire et surtout celles et ceux qui ont été élus, pour Elena, Rosemary, Kiminou, Guillaume, Brett, Marie, Steven, Valéria, Philippe et Linéa. Que tu leur donnes, Seigneur, cette même force de vie que nous voyons porter fruit dans la moisson. Nous te prions pour toutes les personnes qui participent et organisent ce service, pour nos professeurs de français, pour nos volontaires, pour Makiko et le groupe de Taizé, pour tous nos visiteurs ici, avec nous, par la prière, en ligne. Prenons ensemble la prière 62, page 682. Page 682. La prière attribuée à Saint François d'Assise, dont l'Église commémore le ministère aujourd'hui. Seigneur, fais de nous des instruments de ta paix, là où est l'haine, que nous mettions l'amour, là où est l'offense, que nous mettions le pardon, là où est la discorde, que nous mettions l'union, là où est le doute, que nous mettions la foi, là où est le désespoir, que nous mettions l'espérance, là où sont les ténèbres, que nous mettions la lumière, là où est la tristesse, que nous mettions la joie. Ô Seigneur, que nous ne cherchions pas tant à être consolés qu'à consoler, à être compris qu'à comprendre, à être aimés qu'à aimer, car c'est en se donnant que l'on reçoit, c'est en s'oubliant que l'on se retrouve, c'est en pardonnant que l'on obtient le pardon, c'est en mourant que l'on ressuscite à l'éternelle vie. Amen. Page 262, page 262. Confessons les péchés que nous avons commis contre Dieu, sa création et notre prochain. Dieu de miséricorde, nous confessons que nous avons péché contre toi, en pensée, en parole et en acte, par ce que nous avons fait et ce que nous avons omis de faire. Nous ne t'avons pas aimé de tout notre cœur, nous n'avons pas aimé notre prochain comme nous-mêmes. Nous regrettons sincèrement ces fautes, humblement nous nous en repentons. Pour l'amour de ton Fils Jésus-Christ, prends pitié de nous et pardonne-nous. Alors ta volonté fera notre joie, et nous pourrons marcher dans tes chemins, pour la gloire de ton nom. Amen.
Que le Dieu Tout-Puissant vous fasse miséricorde, qui vous pardonne tous vos péchés par Jésus-Christ notre Seigneur, qui vous affermit en tout bien, et par la puissance de l'Esprit Saint, qui vous garde pour la vie éternelle. Amen.
Amen.
On se lève. Que la paix du Seigneur soit toujours avec vous.
Et avec ton esprit.
Merci. Asseyez-vous, s'il vous plaît. Wir laden Sie herzlich zu unserem Oktoberfest ein. Ein Fest folgt danach. Bienvenue à la petite église française du Saint Esprit pour notre Oktoberfest. Après la Sainte Communion ce matin, aura lieu une toute petite présentation par moi, par Fred, par Joris et par Cynthia et par Aya. Pas très long, peut-être 20 minutes. Quelque chose de pareil. Donc, prie de rester. C'est immédiatement après. Donc, il n'y a pas de pause, non. Oui. Non? But très bien, excellent. So, welcome to Little French Church of Saint Esprit for our Oktoberfest. Immediately after the service today, we will be giving a little presentation, why we do Oktoberfest, for instance, what people eat on Oktoberfest, what they might drink on Oktoberfest, and what they might sing, together with a little bit of history and the history of an interesting object, which you'll discover if you stay behind after the service and follow that little presentation of about 20 minutes. It will follow immediately on the service, so there'll be no pause between the two. I'm so sorry that we can't all be together on such a lovely autumny type day out in the garden as we normally are, but we've learned to try and make the most of the circumstances that we're under, and we'll continue to do that all together. Thank you for being there, and thank you for joining in too with the comments in the live chat. Please keep that up so that we all feel as if we're still part of this family of Saint Esprit, which we all certainly are. Just a couple of quick reminders. Thank you for your continued donations to Saint Esprit, which are received with heartfelt thanks, not just by me or by the staff of the church, but to those to whom those donations make a huge difference. We will be discussing at the vestry meetings upcoming, where we will be giving our annual donations this year, in a year that's been such a difficult one for so many people. So thank you for those donations. Keep up the good work. It's a way that we all belong to each other and are all responsible for one another. I think that's all I want to say just at the moment. Just a quick reminder of the services during the week. Do join us for those if you would like to. If you'd like to come along to one of them, please do send a little message to Fred, and we'll see if we can fit you in on Wednesday or those morning and evening prayers or the Taizé service, which are continuing. And our Wednesday evening study group, if you'd like to belong to that and you're not on the mailing list for it, do let us know and we can put you on the Zoom link. Also, you'll be able to find the two previous ones now up on our YouTube site. So you can look back on them or look at them for the first time if you'd like to, if you weren't able to be there. I think that's all for this morning. Présentant avec joie au Seigneur les offrandes de notre travail et de notre vie.
Be
Page 263 du livre de la prière commune. Page 263 of the Book of Common Prayer. 263. Le Seigneur soit avec vous.
Et avec ton esprit,
Élevons notre cœur.
nous nous tournons vers le Seigneur.
Rendons grâce au Seigneur notre Dieu.
Cela est juste et bon.
Il est juste et bon, c'est notre joie, de te rendre grâce en tout temps et en tout lieu, Père Tout-Puissant, Créateur du ciel et de la terre, par Jésus-Christ notre Seigneur, lui qui, le premier jour de la semaine, a vaincu la mort en surgissant de la tombe, et par sa résurrection glorieuse, nous a ouvert la voie de la vie éternelle. C'est pourquoi nous te louons. Joignons nos voix aux anges et aux archanges, à toute l'assemblée de cieux, qui chante sans cesse cet hymne à la gloire de ton nom.
Saint, 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 très saint Seigneur, ô Dieu tout-puissant. Saint, 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 très saint Seigneur, ô Dieu tout-puissant. Laisse les rangs des sons pleins de ta gloire, Hosanna dans les cieux, Hosanna dans les cieux. Béni celui qui vient, au nom du Seigneur Dieu, Hosanna dans les cieux, Hosanna dans les cieux.
Père saint et plein de bonté, dans ton amour infini, tu nous as créés pour être tiens. Et lorsque, succombant au péché, nous sommes devenus esclaves du mal et de la mort, dans ta miséricorde, tu as envoyé Jésus-Christ, ton Fils unique éternel, pour partager notre nature humaine, vivre et mourir comme l'un de nous, et nous réconcilier avec toi, le Dieu et Père de tous. Il a étendu les bras sur la croix, et obéissant à ta volonté, il s'est offert lui-même, sacrifice parfait pour le salut du monde. La nuit où il fut livré à la souffrance et à la mort, notre Seigneur Jésus-Christ prit du pain, et, t'ayant rendu grâce, il le rompit et le donna à ses disciples, en disant, « Prenez, mangez, ceci est mon corps, livré pour vous. Faites ceci en mémoire de moi. » À la fin du repas, il prit la coupe, et après avoir rendu grâce, il la leur donna, en disant, « Buvez-en tous, ceci est mon sang, le sang de la nouvelle alliance, versé pour vous et pour la multitude, en rémission des péchés. Chaque fois que vous en boirez, faites-le en mémoire de moi. » Proclamons le mystère de la foi. Christ est mort, Christ est ressuscité, Christ reviendra. Dans ce sacrifice de louange et d'action de grâce, nous célébrons, Père très saint, le mémorial de notre rédemption. En rappelant la mort de Jésus-Christ, sa résurrection et son ascension, nous t'offrons ces dons qui viennent de toi. Sanctifie-les par ton Esprit Saint, qui deviennent pour ton peuple le corps et le sang de ton Fils, nourriture et boisson sainte de la vie nouvelle en lui. Sanctifie-nous aussi, pour que nous puissions recevoir avec foi ce Saint-Sacrement, et te servir dans l'unité, la fidélité et la paix. Et au dernier jour, conduis-nous avec tous les saints dans la joie de ton royaume éternel. Nous te le demandons par ton Fils Jésus-Christ, par lui, avec lui et en lui. À toi, Dieu le Père Tout-Puissant, dans l'unité du Saint-Esprit, tout honneur et toute gloire, maintenant et dans les siècles des siècles. Amen. Et maintenant, comme nous l'avons appris le Sauveur, nous osons dire: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, que ton nom soit sanctifié, que ton règne vienne, que ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain de ce jour. Pardonne-nous nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons aussi à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous soumets pas à la tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car c'est à toi qu'appartiennent le règne, la puissance et la gloire, dans les siècles des siècles. Amen. Alléluia, le Christ, notre Pâque, a été immolé. Célébrons donc la fête. Alléluia.
Adieu de qui ôte les péchés du monde, et pitié donne-nous et pitié, agneau de Dieu, pitié. Agneau de Dieu qui ôte les péchés du monde, accorde-nous ta paix.
Les dons de Dieu pour le peuple de Dieu. Prenez en mémoire de ce que Christ est mort pour vous, que votre cœur, par la foi, s'en nourrisse avec reconnaissance.
Change-moi, polis-moi, forge-moi, façonne-moi. Viens, Esprit de Dieu vivant, viens et règne en moi. Viens, Esprit de Pentecôte, sois lumière en moi. Viens, Esprit, chauffer mon cœur, viens, rayonne en moi. Forme-moi, parle-moi, guide-moi et prie en moi. Viens, Esprit, inspire-moi, viens et règne en moi.
Prions le Seigneur. Dieu éternel, notre Père des cieux, dont ta grâce tu nous acceptes comme membres vivants de ton Fils Jésus-Christ, notre Sauveur, et qui nous a nourris de ton aliment spirituel dans le sacrement de son corps et de son sang. Envoie-nous maintenant en paix dans le monde et donne-nous la force et le courage pour t'aimer et te servir dans la joie et la simplicité du cœur, par le Christ notre Seigneur. Amen. Que la paix de Dieu, qui surpasse toute intelligence, garde vos cœurs et vos pensées dans la connaissance et l'amour de Dieu et de son Fils Jésus-Christ notre Seigneur. Et que la bénédiction de Dieu Tout-Puissant, Père, Fils et Saint-Esprit, descende sur vous et demeure à jamais. Amen. Chantons ensemble notre dernier cantique, ce qui est ô joie immense, infinie. Mais on va chanter le premier verset en allemand et puis on va rechanter ce premier verset en allemand à la fin de notre cantique. Mais tout est imprimé, c'est très facile à suivre dans les bulletins. We're going to sing together our final hymn on a tune which you will all know. Those first words there are the Schiller words to Beethoven's Ode to Joy, which is the hymn of the European Union of which I am still a part. All these years later. I am glad to say, but perhaps this will be the last time I can sing it as that. But still, here we go. The first verse in German, then we've got several verses in French, and then a final verse again of the Schiller words to the thing. You can follow it in the bulletin. Bon, voilà.
Freude, schöner Gotterfunken, Tochter aus
Allez en paix, aimez et servez le Seigneur. Nous rendons grâce à Dieu.
Oh, voila, a little wardrobe malfunction here. There we go, I'm back to where it should be. Welcome to our post-service little Oktoberfest, which we've prepared for everybody. It's very simple, very straightforward. I'm going to give you a little introduction to the Oktoberfest and why we do it here at Saint Esprit, what we typically do, what we typically share together, a short story about the celebration, and then I'm going to hand over to Joris to talk a little bit about what a Flammekuche is and what its origins are and why and how it is eaten. And then we'll follow the little order from there. So first of all, people sometimes say, why do you celebrate an Oktoberfest in a French church? Surely the French and the Germans have got enough history going on without adding to it in this way. Well, here's why we do it. There are two reasons, really. Well, more than two now, after all of these years since we first started it. First of all, when I came to Saint Esprit, we had quite a few Germanophones in the congregation, including Hugo, who sadly died earlier this year in the pandemic. He had been a faithful attender at Saint Esprit for many, many years. He was conscripted at the age of 13 into Hitler's army at the end of the Second World War. And his feelings about Germany were not so hot after that. And so he ended up here in the United States, where he became a member of Saint Esprit. There were various other Germanophone members, and still are. There's a surprising number of Germanophones at Saint Esprit even today, including Guillaume, who studied over in Germany many years to become a professional printer. Very difficult and complicated job it is. So it's not just German. There's also the places in Africa where Germany was involved during the Empire. So we celebrated it to celebrate those Germanophones in our congregation too. But here's another historical reason why we celebrate an Oktoberfest in the church. If you look up here on the crests, which you may not be able to do just at the moment unless, Fred, can you swivel them over? You here have on the wall the Bevier, the Crispels, the Dubois, the Deos, the Eltons, the Freers, the Hasbrooks, and the Lefevres. These are families from New Pfalz, the New Rhineland. They fled first, not to the United States, they actually fled to Germany, or the Rhineland states. And they fled to the Rhineland states on their way here to New York City. So that's why I said in the sermon, if it wasn't for the welcoming Rhineland states, the free states of the Rhine, of the Pfalz, Saint Esprit would probably not exist in its current form today because people might have stayed behind or had been killed, actually, in France. And instead they sought temporary shelter in what we call Germany now, and eventually arrived here in the middle of the 1600s, middle to late 1600s. We also celebrate Oktoberfest because it's the beginning of the autumn and it's nice to have a party. It also coincides with St. Francis's Day, when all of nature is celebrated, and we all know the stories of St. Francis of Assisi. Typically, what we would do is just what we've done here in church, with some readings and some hymns in German. Thank you so much, Joris. Your talents never cease to amaze. It was very nicely read in German and saved me from doing it this year. Thank you so much. So it's nice to hear the gospel in the language that was spoken by some of the founders of this church, actually. Too. So then immediately after that, we gather together in the garden to eat Schukrut, or sauerkraut, and to eat little onion tarts and Flammekuche, and to have some nice non-alcoholic cider or other drinks, and also taste some beers and Gewürztraminer, which we're going to be talking about in a minute. And that's the end of our celebration, but we don't normally get the opportunity to do what we're doing now. Some nice stories about the celebration. Michelle Jacobi began it for us. It was her idea. She joined us last summer, actually. Some of you may remember. She may even be following us today online. I don't know. If you are, Michelle, do say hello. And thanks again for inaugurating this celebration for us way back then. I know now that you're living in Paris, but it was lovely to have you with us last summer. It was also the very first Sunday that I came to Saint Esprit. It was not an Oktoberfest at that time, and there were probably on my very first Sunday, I was very nervous. I marked up my prayer book with difficult words. I can't remember exactly what they were now, but I think in my old prayer book they're still underlined. And there were probably about 15 of us in the church all together on my very, very first Sunday when I began here at Saint Esprit as the priest in charge, as it was then, or the vicar in 1994. So it's got some very happy memories for me, this particular day. It's a day that certainly changed my life and changed it for the better, and I'm happy to be celebrating it today. So I think that's all I've got for the moment. I shall be coming back in a minute. So I'm going to hand over to Joris now, who's going to tell us a little bit about an Alsatian speciality. Voilà.
Hello, bonjour à tous, rebonjour. Alors, malheureusement, on ne peut pas manger de la Flammekuche tous ensemble cette année. Unfortunately, we cannot eat Flammekuche all together this year. But I can tell you a little bit about the story, so you can eat on the story and remember it later when you make some at your place or eat some here next year. Words and foods, that's what we do usually in a Christian church. And so let's mix them together and let's have a look at how it came out that Flammekuche became such an important meal for all of us, in the Alsace especially. So it's a Flammekuche We don't have a picture here, but later we'll post a little recipe with some pictures. So it's a Alsatian specialty. Literally, it means blazed quiche, Flamme Küche. It's quite an interesting history because it's always related to the life of rural local communities in Alsace. So when the Flamme Küche was invented, that is like in the 18th, 19th century, people didn't have ovens at their place. So they had to share a oven. So they would have an oven with their neighbors, and usually located quite outside of the houses, the buildings, the hamlets where they were, so that like if there's a fire, the whole house doesn't burn with it, because there's always fire in an oven. And so where I'm from, actually in Brittany, you can still see many of these ovens. They're probably the size of here, like our altar space. And they're usually built in like stone and clay or bricks. So it's quite a big structure. And yeah, so that's what they use for making bread, but also Flammkuche, as we'll see. So the baker is the one in charge of heating the oven. That's something that can take a little while because you have to stuff it with a lot of wood. You use like smaller wood, and you put bigger chunks of wood, and you make sure then that it's really warm. And the thing is that you're not going to put fire on when you're baking. The oven is going to get to be like very hot by itself, but then you remove you put the wood in it, you remove the embers, and then the oven is very hot by itself because the stone, everything has captured the heat. So it's almost ready then to put your bread in it. It's almost ready. Because once the embers are removed, and the oven is still too hot for the bread. You cannot put bread in an oven that's way too hot. We know that. It has happened to us at Saint Esprit when we burnt a couple of things when we were preparing things. So you have to make sure the oven is at the good temperature and you don't leave it in there too long because you're doing something else. And so this moment is the key moment because it's too hot for the bread, but it's heat and you want to use this heat. And you're also very hungry because it's the end of the day. You've been working, you've made the dough, you've shaped the loaves and everything. People have started the oven. It takes quite a while because you also had to find the wood, all these type of things that you've stored all together. So it's a great moment of conviviality. And you want then you have a little snack. So you open a little bottle of something, and you put the leftover dough that you had, or like some dough that you had just discarded just to keep it for that. You spread it, you put some cream or like type of milk on it, and you put some onions and whatever you want, whatever you have at hand, and you put it in the oven quick because the oven is very hot, so it blazes there. And just at that moment, you can take it. It probably takes a couple of minutes, really not long, and then you take it out and you usually cut it. Traditionally, people cut it on the boards that they use to bring the loaf baskets from the house to the oven because the oven is outside. So you have like big boards that you use as trails, and so that's why it's usually presented like cut on a wooden board. And apparently, the right way to eat it is to fold it and to eat it with your hands. And I thought it quite looked like the way New Yorkers eat pizza, no? Like the $1 pizza. That's quite the same thing. So that's a Alsatian version of the New Yorkers pizza. Yes, that's why it's good too. So the Flammekuche, because of this atmosphere, you can see the atmosphere like fall day in Alsace or like in Germany. It has the taste of this like the end of a busy autumn or fall day in Alsace. People have gathered to work together as a community and to make their daily bread because just after this little snack, they're going to bake the bread. It is not, as my grandmother would say, there's no Stall, there is no shishi, there's no fuss. about it. It's not pretentious at all. Yet, it's because of that that is very powerful. It reminds us of our festivals here at Saint Esprit, the work and the joy they entailed. Flammekuchen also tells us that we are never eating alone, even if we're not in the same room, around the same oven. If you make Flammekuchen, once we've shared a recipe, if you want, or maybe you've done one already, or any other dish you want to make at home, you can share in the life, the work, the sorrows of the others who came before us, who prepared the ingredient you're using, or shaped the recipe. You can give thanks to this. You can give thanks to God. We cannot gather together at the moment and share the wine, the good Gewürztraminer, or other non-alcoholic options, and the bread, the body of our chef, Jesus Christ. The bread is not ready for us, and this pandemic is way too hot now. But there is here and now, we can make and eat Flammekuchen, a spirit-blazed Flammekuchen. So I wish you have a beautiful day. I don't think I'm coming back on the program, Fred, am I? No. Well, I was not scheduled. So it was a pleasure to be here with you today and remembering all of you who are not here on site, but sharing together in this moment. And God bless you. God bless. See you later. Bye-bye. Auf Wiedersehen.
Bonjour. I feel like every time I do the Old Testament or the epistle reading and I don't say hello. Bonjour. Cynthia is fixing the camera because apparently I never know how tall I am. Is it all right? All right. And then you know what I'm doing? Then I do this. No, I'm fine. I'll just stay like this. So yeah, we have a little bit of presentation. The purpose of this was to, because we can share the food and drinks with you, is to share a little bit about the stories of those. So next year when we're all together, you can actually think about those things we're eating and drinking. Joris just talked a little bit about Flammekuchen. It's something that's, to me, it's really funny. We even have a chain of restaurant, I don't know if you guys know that, that's called Flams in France, where they make only Flammekuchen. It's called Flams, yeah. So like Joris, I used to have an Alsatian, actually used German, meets Alsatian grandfather. You need to actually take your ancestry DNA test and we'll end up being cousins or something. We'll know that. We'll let you know if I'm cousin with Joris out of an old cousin, last cousin. I'm going to talk about three things, but it's one thing altogether. I'm going to talk about the Gewürztraminer, which we usually share on this day. I'm going to talk a little bit about les malgré nous, which is a long story about Alsatian people. I'll try to make it very short. And then I'll speak a little bit about the Alsatian dialect. The purpose of this is to, when I'm going to talk about the malgré nous, it's not to talk too much about history, it's mostly to talk about how people felt. And then Nigel will come and present that little object. I feel it's like the reveal of the end. It's like everyone's doing, what is the object? Maybe we can like do it like this, or Joris can come back on the side and do like this. And then we'll have a little song by Cynthia, which is going to be pretty funny. 2 songs, wow.
One song in the middle, and then of course the ending for the bye.
Okay, so, well, I guess Cynthia got busy while we were starting this. She added another one. So now we have 2 songs, even more. Anyway, the Gewürztraminer. First, I'm butchering the name of this, and while I was preparing this, I was trying to remember how my grandpa said I had to pronounce it. And I believe it's from the Alsatian pronunciation, the is actually like Gewürztraminer, something like this. I'm not really sure. We'll talk about this when we get to the Alsatian dialect. So it's a white wine from the Alsatian vineyards. It can only be produced from the Gewürztraminer RS cépage, which is the grape. It's a pink grape, so I wish I could show you a picture. It's very beautiful. It's kind of small and pink, and it's considered a noble grape in Alsace, along with Riesling, Pinot Gris, and Muscat. So it comes from the Traminers variety, which has been cultivated in Alsace since the Middle Age. We have sources that tells us of Traminers in the 16th century, and it was actually replaced by Gewürztraminer in the end of the 19th century. It's very hard to grow, and I have a little anecdote. There's a little bit of anecdotes here to make this a little more fun and not too much history. It's that Germans have tried to breed an easier to grow sort of Gewürztraminer because it's very hard to grow. So as an example, in 1932, a man named George Scheu crossed Gewürztraminer with Müller-Thurgau, and he produced what we call Wurzer. I don't know if I pronounce this correctly. A little of which is grown in the Rheinhessen and in England. So maybe you've had that. A fake Gewürztraminer. This is my roots coming out. It's fake Gewürztraminer. It is the most aromatic of Alsatian wines. If you have gone to our wine tastings, we have tasted Gewürztraminer, I think, twice in there. And Patrick, who might be with us today, Patrick Serré, our specialist in wine, will tell you some people say it's sweet or it tastes like honey, which it does, but he will say, no, it's not sweet. It is, anybody knows? Spicy, épicé. It is spicy. It is actually in the name because Gewür means spicy. So it's basically Gewürztraminer means the spicy Traminer. It is considered it is a vendange tardive, so this is also why the grape is actually harvested very late. So it's a very sweet grape when you harvest it. A little bit of this is going to be the end on the Gewürztraminer. I'm going to finish with an anecdote, but just so you know, it's actually now the second most grown grape in Alsace. It only used to produce 7.5 million gallons, sorry, in 1945. It's still a lot. And now it's actually producing twice as much. So in 70 years, I want to say, they've doubled the number of gallons they produce. At first, in the 60s, it was actually became an AOC. You might know that restaurant in the Upper East Side called AOC, which is Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée. So you cannot make in France, because in America you can do whatever you want with names, you cannot make Gewürztraminer if you're not making it the correct way and in Alsace and with the correct grape. They even went as far as making a bill of, it's called a bill of specification and production. So you have to make it the correct way, in the right order, with the correct grape. And since the 70s, if you remember the bottles, I wish I would have taken down a bottle, it's upstairs. You have to put it in a flute bottle. So it's kind of shaped like this. So if you go to the store, you can actually spot them because they have a very, very recognizable bottle. Now, the last thing on this, I want to bring something my grandpa said. Before he died, I saw him and I started working here before. And I told him, first I told him I worked in a church, a Protestant church. Said he was he was raised Catholic, so he was like, "Oh, you're going with the Protestants." And but I told him, you know, we're having parties and we found Gewürztraminer and we drink Gewürztraminer during the parties. And he was saying, "Oh, come on," because he was telling me that a producer of Gewürztraminer in Alsace used to refuse to export it. You could only buy it in Alsace. So he was amazed that we could find it in New York. Well, now you can actually find it everywhere, but it's a funny story. That's actually, like, when I looked up the history of Gewürztraminer, I could not find anywhere any note that it was not exported. Anyway, so I wonder what you think. You probably have tasted it here. If you have not, I invite you to do so. It's sweet nectar, that's how I would describe it. You can put in the chat if you've tried it, like, do you like it? Do you not like it? What do you like about it? Next, I want to talk to you. I'm going to stay a lot in Alsace. I know it's a Munich, German Oktoberfest, but because we're French, Francophone church, we talk a lot about France. Les Malgré nous. This is going to go on World War II. A lot of people think Les Malgré nous would translate to against our will. As you know, Nigel has mentioned this in the sermon, Alsatians were going back and forth from France to Germany and Germany to France as many as 4 times. Actually 3 times, but it changed nationality 4 times. It's actually a long story. It started in the Franco-Prussian War. So in 1871, an Alsatian in 1871, at the end of the Franco-Prussian War, and there was the Treaty of Frankfurt, and so Alsace was made German, and it had been French for 2 centuries. So everyone felt French. The congressmen protested of Alsace, and I have some quotes. So I'm going to try to make this pretty fast. But basically, I want to talk about how the Alsatians felt, which we have a lot of record of, because a lot were writing about it. They did feel that they expressed their feeling that they were abandoned by France and they felt alienated. To them, they shared good and bad fortune with French for over 2 centuries, and they felt French. In a little quote, those congressmen actually wrote, "We proclaim in this is my translation, sorry, it's a little off. We proclaim in this impregnable letter the right of Alsatians and Lorrains to stay member of the French nation, and we swear as much for ourselves than for our principals, children, and their descendants, to claim this for perpetuity by any means against all comers and impostors." So this is where we have the first reference to the against their will, les malgré nous, because they were saying that they were, in 1872, they were called to join the German army, and they became the Prussians against their will. When they had to join the army, 33,000 Alsatians were eligible to join the army, and only 7,000 showed up to the call. A lot of them flee. They just refused to join the army. And they flee and went to serve France and joined the French army, effectively cutting themselves off their homeland. So something to think about. The other ones who just refused to serve were condemned. Now, World War I was also actually the first real source of the malgré nous, the name. They're enrolled in the German army during World War I, and again, they tried to flee to France or Russia. And because Germany saw this as a defiance, this is an important point. Germany never trusted the Alsatians because of this. They actually condemned 5,000 of them during the 4 years of World War I. So there's a tradition of hostility against the German in Alsace. This is something to keep in mind. I feel like now that we're getting older and older, this is hopefully disappearing, but there's always been that feeling. And the malgré nous terms becomes official when the Association of Veterans called themselves this way in 1921. After World War I, one of the things to remember is that Alsace was literally in the middle. So it became French again, and it was literally in the middle of uncertainty. So all the industries just moved away, and it became the economy became terrible over there, and they felt danger. Imagine yourself being in the land that is at the border between 2 countries that are technically at peace, but war seems like it's going to break any day. The Alsatians felt that their region had been sacrificed. And one thing to remember, because this is going to come up after, I'm going to go right on World War II, the most important part, is that Adolf Hitler, when he was before the war, so declared publicly several times that he had no interest in Alsace, and that he said that he didn't want it to be German. Yet, when World War II broke out in 1939, something happened. I'm going to say what. The zone was evacuated, the whole zone right between the 2 countries, and became the Front d'Alsace. So everyone was sent away. And 1940 became the biggest years. The Germans invaded and occupied that zone immediately. The armistice was written and signed, but it did not concede any territory. A lot of people don't know this, is that when you have an armistice, it is not a treaty, so you're not actually giving away any land. So it was still French. But Adolf Hitler, officially decided to empty the conquered land and he even visited the empty land, and asked his army at this time, "Do you like this land?" To which they say, "Yes, Führer." And he said, therefore, we will keep it forever. This is when he changed his mind. Hitler, at that point, is naming Wagner, a very important person at that time, a prominent Nazi, who answered directly to Adolf Hitler to rule over the region. A lot of things happened. I'm not going to go over every single thing of them, but one of the things that he did was to cleanse the region of Jews, French and Francophone Alsatians, foreigners, gypsies, and any social person. Just a little note, though, this was also done by the French during World War I, so let's not just put all the blame on them. They did the same thing when they took back over Alsace. So Alsatian villages and cities had to take back their German names. That was part of it. The French was forbidden, and let's go on a lighter note on this thing. The franc, the money was forbidden, and they had to be converted to marks at a rate of half of its value. And it even went as far as forbidding to wear a beret. If you wore a beret in Alsace during that time, you would get arrested. Even though it was legal in Germany. This is how much the German did not trust the Alsatians, for right reasons actually, but anyway. To go very quick on this, because I don't want to go into a history lesson, they started schools where all the kids had to go, and those schools were basically training camps for the army. Adolf Hitler didn't really want to put the Alsatians on the front for a very long time. He did not want to have them join the army by force at first because he thought that they would just turn against the Germans on the French front. But when they had the Russian front and they needed more and more people, he started to enroll them. And it was in 1942 that we have the darkest of days when they decided to forcibly recruit Alsatians, which was 130,000 men. Many tried to flee or rebel. They were hanging French flags on the train cars, or when there was a big gathering, they would just sing hiding the Marseillaise in the background. And this led actually to create a forbidden zone, 3 kilometers wide around Alsace. So if any Alsatian was found in that zone, it means he was trying to flee and they were arrested. Then they were sent to the Russian front, as I said. I'm not going to go over all this. I'm going to go further. I'm just going to go on a little bit on the story of my grandpa on there, because I feel it's always better to have a testimony than have all the facts like a history lesson. My grandpa was at home, and he was right at the end, in 44, I believe, at the age where he could be taken. Actually, no, before that, he was taken to the school I was talking about, which was basically an ideology school. And what happened is that they would knock on your door and they say, you have to come to the school, which is a internat, comment on dit ça? Internat is a school where you stay. A boarding school. And they say, if you don't come, we'll kill your parents. So it was as easy as this. You have to come to the Nazi school or we kill your parents. Once he turned 18 in 1944, I think that's it, he was sent to the Russian front. And here's the story. That's actually a very beautiful story in the end. On the first day he was on the Russian front, he was put there in the snow to stay all night, and they were supposed to send a relief, like the next shift, a shift relief, and they never sent it, so he spent the whole night. His foot got frozen, so he had to go to the infirmary, and they had to amputate half his foot. But it's actually a blessing in disguise. After this one night on the Russian front, and he had his foot half amputated, they were about to shoot him because they said that he self-mutilated to be sent home, to which he was actually about to get shot when he raised his voice, he spoke to his superiors to say, no, it's not my fault. He left me with nobody to take my shift. And this is why my foot got frozen. And the superior heard it and sent him home, where he met my grandma in the hospital. So it's a beautiful story in the end. And now I'm just going to speak a little bit about the Alsatian dialects, and I'll leave you be, and we'll have a little more fun with the songs. I'm sorry, that was a very dense thing, but I think it's very important. I'm not going to go on nationalism, but I think you will finish on this maybe, or Joyce. The Alsatian dialect is actually a dialect on its own. We call it a dialect because it's not codified by grammar. And it actually has a great wealth because it actually was cut, as I said, in the 16th century. I think, 16th century it became French. So it was cut from the evolution of Standard German. So it's actually keeping a lot of archaic terms that were there before. There are many pronunciations because of this. So they adopted the French and German writing, and so depending on how you spell it, it shows the different pronunciations in this sort of micro-region of Alsatian. And its origin is thought to be, we don't know for sure, similar to the origin of German around the 4th and 5th century. And German became, the Standard German was created in the 15th century, or noted, I guess. A fun note is that Alsatian is actually spoken by a few hundred people in Texas. Did you know this? There is a city called Castroville, I don't know if you've ever heard about it, in Texas, where some hundred people speak Alsatian because it was founded by people from the Mulhouse region. And there's also some Amish communities in Indiana who speak Alsatian. You also have to understand that before World War II, Alsace was actually a very rural place. And when I'm saying rural, my grandpa told me they didn't even have tap water. Like you have to go to the well. So the Alsatian was spoken in your house, in your household. And a lot of Alsatian didn't even know French. They just spoke their language. If you want to know how many people speak Alsatian, in 2014 a study was done, and actually 43% of people from Alsace said that they knew how to speak Alsatian. That's 800,000 people. In the 50s, it was 80%. So this is still disappearing, even though it's half of it. 33% in 2014 said that they knew a little bit or understood, but it's kind of like how a lot of people tell you they know French and they just say bonjour. So I don't know how we can refer to this. One of the things that was very interesting, because we have a little extract of Alsatian to play for you after, it's very short, 40 seconds, is that you will actually hear a bit of German, an archaic German, and we hear a little bit that sounds like French. But when I listened to this extract, I told Nigel, it's funny, it sounds like Hebrew. And when I was doing research on the language, I found out that it was actually influenced by what's called Yiddish Deutsch, which is a language brought by the Jews from Poland and Eastern Europe. So there's a little bit of Hebrew root in it. Finally, I will just, before the extract, I will finish on an Alsatian expression that I try to look up the pronunciation, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but I'm going to try my hardest. It's an Alsatian expression that is Makot net ever ola, ven ma nur en sina shipfra locht. I can say that. Locht. I don't know if you speak German, you understood anything I said. Probably not. This was Alsatian, and it means on ne peut pas dépasser quelqu'un si l'on marche dans ses traces. Which means you cannot go past somebody if you're walking in their steps. Now, I will have, Nigel, if you can come back here, but before you get started on the object, I will just play from the computer the extract.
Sure.
I'm going to try to make the volume a little loud so everyone can hear it. Yeah. This is an extract that we found on the internet on an Alsatian project that is about going to the fruit market. So let's see if you can find the fruit.
The only word in Alsatian that Odile taught me was lumpersok. Lumpersok is a stupid person, and it means literally a lumpy sock, or a heavy sock. And she thought the derivation of the word was from the Middle Ages, when men used to put a lumpy sock down the front of their trousers to make them look more impressive. That's a very Alsatian story, I'm sure.
I'm going to play because they don't hear me. I'm going to play the extract now.
You're going to play the extract?
Yeah, can you say it because they can't hear me?
Oh, yes, we're going to play the extract now of Life in a Fruit Market.
Am Obststand, au stand des fruits.
Bananen, peren, mirabellen, Äpfel, Blumen. Was ihr wollt?
Eure Bananen sind ja überzeitig, fast schwarz.
Nein, ich schloss erst zum halben Preis.
Wegen wir auch 3 Pfund Äpfel ab. Aber kein Säure.
Was für ein Ski? Brennende oder golden?
Welche roten haben wir für eine Apfelküche?
Für eine Köderküche habe ich da auch schöne Mirabellen. Ich hätte lieber ein paar saftige Madame Schenkel. Lieber ein saftiger Madame Schenkel als ein saurer Apfel. Nicht alle Pflüme sind Obst.
Merci. That was fun. How much did we understand? So isn't she going to be making, he was recommending a certain sort of fruit for the tart?
Yeah, I heard
Mirabelle. And banana. A banana. Yes.
It's talking about rennet.
Yes.
An apple.
A sort of apple. I think she ends...
The French ones.
Odile told me about her time in Alsace. She was born in Alsace of Alsatian parents of long generation, and she said she remembered the Nazis coming into Alsace, and she, a typical Odile story, was playing the Marseillaise on the piano as the soldiers were walking through, and they banged on the door and came in, and she said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, I thought it was the setting of a poem by Schiller." Which indeed it was. She had this poem up with the Marseillaise music, but the words of Schiller underneath it. And apparently they would come into your houses and check your salt and pepper shakers. And if they said sel and poivre, they were confiscated. And also they weren't allowed to use the word parapluie when they were speaking in Alsatian or in German. They had to call it a Regenschirm. Which was the German word for it that the Germans didn't even use.
Actually, one thing I forgot to repeat
Yes?
is that I forgot to say that my grandpa actually changed his name. His name was Armand.
Oh, yeah.
And they made him a new ID and they called it Armand.
Herman, yes, and his name was Armand. Armand.
They made a German ID and he was called Herman.
And he had to be called Herman instead. Yeah. Well, the object that I've got to show you is isn't just of historical interest. I think it has a contemporary feel to it as well, and I'll explain why. Odile's parents, as I said, were Alsatians, and he was forced to serve in the First World War on the German side. He was old enough to have done that. Now, as we know, the Germans in the end lost the First World War, and at the very end of that war, those soldiers who were serving on that side were demobbed, obviously, didn't have to serve in the army anymore. But they were kept for a little while before they were allowed to return home. They'd been scattered all over the place on the Russian front and also on the European front too. And during that time, Odile's father dismantled a gun carriage. That is to say, it was one of those great big carriages that was made out of brass, bronze, and what have you, that you would put a big heavy cannon on. Probably Big Bertha, that huge cannon that the Germans claimed could bombard Paris from the Western Front because the armaments could reach that far. He dismantled the gun carriage, and he forged out of this gun carriage a letter opener, which is this. And you can see it has a very distinctive Alsatian shape. It's got this little heart on the bottom of it. All the way during the war, he wrote his wife love letters, telling her how much he missed her. And so he decided that he was going to dismantle this gun carriage that he'd been in charge of and turn one of the bronze pieces into a letter opener for his wife. So if you look at it very carefully, you can see it has these ridges on the top. I'm going to need to put my glasses on, but on these little ridges, it says 1918, the numbers 1918, the end of the First World War. And in the heart here, you can see his initial and her initial, R and O. Here we go.
It has to be in the frame. You should be able to see it now, right?
It reminds me of those great words of the prophet Isaiah. They shall beat their swords into plowshares. That the weapon of war was turned into a gift of love, by which he could open those other letters that they received all the way through that history. And a piece of German armament was used by a person who suddenly became French at the end of the First World War to create something that was bequeathed to his daughter, Odile, at the end of his life. I have decided not to keep this object. I have grandparents, great-grandparents who served in the First World War, but they were neither French nor German nor Alsatian. They were English, and they had their own stories to tell very often. Joris's ancestors from on his father's side, with a name like Burman, you can probably guess they're from Germany originally. But of course, you can't get much more French or Breton than Joris. And many of us have come from many, many different places, and we carry within our genes, within our past, the story of people who have often been in conflict with each other. And somehow this little letter opener here feels like a reconciliation of that conflict somehow. It puts nationality aside and puts personal love at the heart of what had been a weapon of war. So I think Odile, who gave it to me with that story, would be very happy that I give it to Joris with the same story, to keep and tell that story again in the course of his ministry and his life. That's all I had to say just for now. That's how that little letter open relates to the celebration. And I think we're going to finish off with a little music.
Actually,
anything else?
Just skip to one thing I also forgot is a quote from my grandpa who went all this. You can forgive, but never forget.
Yes, you can forgive, but never forget. That's entirely right. And if we did forget, then we would have to learn all of those horrible nationalist lessons and the bitterness of them all over again. Well, I think that's it. And we've got some songs for us from our wonderful Cynthia. Thank you also for that beautiful solo. Thank you.
Thank you. It's so much fun to sing in German. And I don't know, my mic is on?
No, hold on, give me a second. That's fine, there you go. Hold on. There you go, your mic is on.
My mic is on now. Okay, so I thought it might be fun to hear one of the songs that I do for an offertoire in German, and it's from Die Schöpfung by Joseph Haydn, The Creation by Joseph Haydn. And a lot of people love hearing songs in German and romantic music. German music is super romantic, and the poets are super, super romantic. And I'm not sure why, Nigel, they're always mentioning the nightingale. But then I heard through the grapevine that the song of the nightingale is actually quite ugly. So I'm not sure how that became like a very big poetic device. So I'm just going to read from you. This is from the oratorio, The Creation, which I really, really, really love. Opera has sets and costume. Oratorio does not. Oratorio is on the stage with a conductor, concert style, and it usually has a religious text. This one has a little bit of inspiration, biblical as well as from Milton's Paradise Lost. So it took a very, very long time for him to create this very complex libretto. Libretto is the text for an opera or an oratorio. And this is what the angel Gabriel sings in English. You can hear it on YouTube in English and in German. Both were originally composed with the music. Here's the translation. With verdure clad the fields appear, delightful to the ravished sense. By flowers sweet and gay, enhanced is the charming sight. Here fragrant herbs their odors shed. Here shoots the healing plant. With copious fruit the expanded boughs are hung. In leafy arches twine the shady groves. O'er lofty hills majestic forests wave. I'm sure you'll recognize it from, because I occasionally sing it from as an offertoire. Ready, Aya? From that piece, there's a ton of chorus music that you will thoroughly enjoy. So, danke, vielen Dank. Oh, it's time to say goodbye already.
No, I think Nigel can say goodbye. Sorry, this sounds very, very improvised.
Yes, it is.
But wait, is my microphone still up? I remember 1994 very well. Nigel and I were just jungen, they're just very kinder, basically. And it was in October. Mm-hmm. It was a beautiful fall, and it was really incredible. And it's so nice from 15 people to go out to the vast international crowd we have today, especially online. So, happy anniversary, October anniversary.
Thank you. It is a happy anniversary, indeed. Thank you for joining us online today. We miss you all. I still cannot get over how echoey the church is. I'll never get used to that. It feels that acoustic is completely changed by the fact that we can't be physically present all together in the same building, and I always notice that when we're singing, and less so when we do morning and evening prayer, because I've done that on my own or with one or two other people before, but at the moment it does sound very echoey. But we know you're there, and thank you for participating and commenting and everything else. Happy Oktoberfest, happy fall, and may God bless us all and bring us together soon. Thank you for being here. And I think Cynthia does have a final song.
Just a little goodbye song. Ready, Aya?